Awesome.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to welcome you to this alumni career development session focused on strategic career planning. My name is Sam Constance. I'm the Associate Director for Alumni Career Development here at UChicago. Our goal is providing programming and resources to help UChicago alums grow in their careers, learn that professional development, upskilling that's going to take you to the next level, or perhaps make a pivot into a new job or a new field. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, Hallie Crawford. She's a certified career coach, speaker, author, and national career expert with over 21 years of experience. Her company, Create Your Career Path, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, is regularly featured in the media, Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and more. She has her undergraduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and the University of Illinois. With over 1,500 success stories, her team of coaches and resume writers help professionals find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning and go to work. I'm excited to hear about that. Hallie, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us some strategies to get excited to jump out of bed in the morning and go to work.
Well, and so thank you, Sam, that was great. Our new running joke is that jump out of bed in the morning to walk down the hall to go to work, because so many people may still be working from home. And I just realized too that I move around in my home. I've got different kind of office or pseudo office spaces that I can use, and apparently today we're going to be using the dartboard and playing pool and stuff. Haha, just kidding. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Greatly appreciate your time to talk about some of the keys that we want people to consider when they're thinking about their strategic career plan. And the things that we are going to present today and talk about are things that, I guess, two ways to think about it. There are things that people tend to forget to include in their plan. So we want to have some good kind of reminders of certain things that you may not have included in previously in your strategic career plan. Talk a little bit about some of the obstacles people encounter to creating their plan, and also like a more holistic approach to creating your strategic career plan too, because a lot of times people just get really, really practical about the whole thing, which obviously there's an element to that is critically important, but we're going to talk about some of the things underneath that you may not have thought about before. So as Sam said, I'm a certified career coach. I've been coaching and training for just over 22 years now. I will be 50, not this year, but next year. So it's coming up. And the coaches and resume writers on our team, we just all absolutely love helping people achieve whatever career goal it is they're trying to work towards. And the content and material that we're giving to you today is content that we coach our clients on all day, every day. And we just know it's really successful and effective and all of that. So let's talk first about why this is important. It's really important to see your career and be proactive about career management because our jobs and our careers are one of, if not our best asset in some cases for people. And with any asset, you want to manage it and pay attention to it, not just, put it in the corner and go do other things. And the importance of career management, we really feel like it kind of stands the test of time, if you will. It's regardless of the economic climate, everything else. Now, of course, people are paying more attention to their careers these days. And were during COVID too, because there's so much uncertainty. But you've got to pay attention to it regardless, because even when things are quiet and calm and easy, we want you to be proactive about that next step, whether it's, you discover or decide you need to relocate. You've decided you want to move on to a different organization because maybe the culture of your organization has changed because they were bought out. So there's lots of different reasons why we need to pay attention to our careers and be proactive about managing it. And what I'll tell you before we go to this next slide is usually when clients come to us, 9 times out of 10, they have told us that they left their career on autopilot for too long, that they had been thinking about making a change or improving something in their current work environment or whatever it is. And they've been thinking about that for years and they just hadn't done anything about it. And now that's part of why they're calling us to help them be accountable, make it happen. So we don't want time to just pass by, and we don't want people to just keep their careers on autopilot, not just because you don't know what's going to happen from a fear-based perspective, but we want you to be proactive and take the reins so that you're getting that next promotion when you actually want to, and making sure you're challenged and fulfilled. These days, especially if you look at this next slide, the average person is going to change jobs a lot. And that was exacerbated even more because of COVID. So changing jobs is much more of the norm than it ever has been, I think, especially during what the media is calling the Great Recession, the Great Resignation. That's very different, which is what we're going through now. Like, so many people, as a result of COVID, have reevaluated their priorities. And what we are hearing from our clients, and we'll get to this first poll here in just a second, is that they're reevaluating their priorities and saying, I'm not going to settle for something less than I really enjoy. I used to like my job, for example, but during COVID, I realized X, Y, and Z. So it's really important, through knowing that you might change jobs however many times, it's really important to remain fulfilled, challenged, and marketable as well. And so, Samantha, if we could do this first poll, we are really curious today to hear how many people out there actually do feel fulfilled in their career. And if you do, which is a great thing, the way that we want you to think about our tips today is to make sure that it stays that way, and add some of those external components that we'll be talking about to your strategic career plan, because you may already have that kind of fulfillment piece in place, which is fantastic. And those of you who say you are not, we really want you to focus on these internal pieces that we're going to talk about first today too, like your values, etc., because we really think that that's the first most important thing to kind of check the box in, and you'll see why in a few moments. So if you could complete the poll, that'd be great. Okay. So not surprisingly, thanks for sharing this, Sam. We've got 90% are saying no, they do not feel fulfilled. And obviously that could be part of why you're here today. So please know that you're going to get a lot of really good information about how to figure that out and make that situation better. And for those of you who said yes, that's great, fantastic. There are certain elements of our career model we're going to want you to look at a little bit differently as we go today too. So let's look at our agenda first here. We've got 3 keys that we're going to present to you. And it's basically, the first thing you want to do when you're thinking about your strategic career plan is we want you to define your internal priorities as well as your external priorities. And what we have found is that the biggest mistake most people make when they're creating their plan is they forget to consider their internal priorities, and that should be helping drive your external priorities. In some cases, people don't consider enough of the external ones. You'll see what we're talking about in a moment. Key number 2 is to establish realistic but also meaningful goals at the same time. And key number 3, obviously, is to develop your plan based on the things that we're talking about today. And we'll discuss some of the key components that we want you to include that, again, you may not have thought of or need to add. Just really quickly, as a reminder, you will get a copy of the recording today. If anyone would like a copy of the presentation, meaning the PowerPoint slides, please feel free. You can visit our website here on this page that's listed, or you can just email us at admin@hollycrawford.com. We would be happy to share those slides with you so you don't feel like you have to frantically write everything down. And I will put the email in the chat box in just a moment here too. Oh, and just quick reminder to everyone, sorry, we are going to have some time for a Q&A at the end. Okay. So let's talk about our first key, and this is to evaluate your internal and external priorities. This model that's listed on this slide here is basically what we call our ideal career model. So when I first started coaching 22 years ago, I realized that we needed to have something for people to latch on to, something tangible for people to better understand the critical components to being in the right career fit and creating their long-term strategic career plan. And so that's what this model shows you, is the different pieces or components, if you will, that you need to incorporate into your strategic career plan, but also to make sure in the long run that you're in the right career fit. So with some of our clients who come to us, and the majority of our clients, when they come to us, they're not feeling totally fulfilled in their jobs. And we help them identify alternative career paths that could be a good fit for them. And what we want you to be thinking about here, and we'll just talk about this for a moment, the reason why we're sharing the model with you all today is you want to include your external priorities of, for my plan, for example, in terms of compensation, by the end of this year or my next performance review. Those are external things, like what's the right compensation for me? How am I leveraging my strengths? And am I going to work on projects, and how can I move towards working on projects, let's say, that are more aligned with my strengths? You might have a few things about like your work environment. For example, you'd like to get a bigger office. You'd like to manage a team versus just one person, or not managing anyone, whatever it is. So there's external components that you want to include in your plan, but we also want you to consider some of these internal things. And what we would define as internal, so to speak, are your career values, and understanding what those are and how you can align your goals, your career goals, with those values. Also, with the most enjoyable tasks that you want to be performing. Is there a way you can guide or adjust your career so that you're performing the right tasks that are really going to make you feel fulfilled at the end of the day? And then another kind of internal priority, we would argue, is your personality type, and making sure that what you're doing career-wise is aligned with who you are and your personality type. Are you more introverted or extroverted, for example? Are you more of a big picture strategic thinker, or more of a detail-oriented person? So you want to evaluate the career model, and one of the first steps that you can take is you can say to yourself, for example, two things using the model as a tool, is you can evaluate on a scale of 1 to 10 where your career is right now in terms of how fulfilling is it. That would go in this box. How much do I enjoy, or am I working on the top enjoyable tasks for me? How often am I leveraging my strengths, et cetera, et cetera? And you can do the kind of current state, and that will start to tell you, by the way, which items or areas are good and you don't need to mess with them too much, versus what areas are lacking and you need to start to do some work there and incorporate that into your plan. So do a current state rating on a scale of 1 to 10 with each of the components, and then do an ideal state kind of visualization, so to speak, or just kind of write down, journal for a minute. If each was at a 10 for you, what would that look like? So 2 ways to use it: current state, and how would you want it to be in an ideal world. That will help you start to think about some of the priorities you want to include inside of your strategic career plan. We'll give you one example of doing this kind of self-reflective exercise, if you will, to help you start to think about both types of priorities to include in your plan. One example would be if you feel like you don't have a great understanding of your strengths. One of the things you could do as an exercise is you could interview 3 people in your personal life or in your professional life, or a little bit of both, and ask them more about what they see are your top strengths. What do you do better than most people they know? And when they think of you, what adjectives come to their mind? You can also take an assessment like the Strengths Finder assessment, and I'll actually put that in here too. So as I said a moment ago, I'm going to put our email address for the slides, and then I'll put this in here too, strengthsfinder.com. Making sure I spell that correctly, is another great assessment. Now, even if you feel like you know your strengths, remember they can change a little bit over time. And we like people to evaluate their strengths and the strengths they want to be leveraging on a regular basis, like, at least once a year, twice a year, ideally, because some people have strengths that they don't want to use anymore because they're sick of performing those tasks, for example. So one way to start to identify your priorities to include in your plan is to think about, okay, how well or how often am I using the strengths that I want to be using in my current position? And if I want to make some changes there, what are some of the things I can do to take action on those for the rest of this year and incorporate those into my plan? Do I need to talk to my supervisor? Can I do or perform some of my tasks in a different way that would actually help leverage my strengths? Can I volunteer my time or try to steer my career or my job in a little bit of a different direction so that it is leveraging my strengths a little bit more? So this is one example, again, using one of the pieces of the model. A second example of something to include and incorporate in your career plan that we feel is really important and people tend to forget. This would be the number one thing that people tend to not incorporate into their plan, and we want them to, is to think about the fulfillment piece. And as part of that, getting clear on what your career values are and how that impacts being on the right career path. Are you leveraging your career values now on a regular basis in your current job? Are your career values aligned with the values of your organization? All of these things are things that are really important. Now, I would say in the past, some people would consider their values and career values maybe kind of fluff. And if nothing else, if there are any, silver lining or good things that have come from COVID, we have seen a lot more people kind of taking a stand for what they want in their jobs. And the majority of the clients that have come to us during COVID, and even more so as of like last fall till today, the majority of them are saying, I just don't feel fulfilled anymore. It's not about, they're not telling us I'm not making enough money, although that could be one of their items. They're not telling us, well, I'm not sure I'm in the right work environment. The majority are saying, I'm not getting that sense of meaning or reward from my company, from my career path, or from my industry as much as I used to. And they're saying that they want that more so. So we actually want people to think about this. And the other reason why is not just because, it's a fad or a trend, but when you look at our model, there's actually a reason why we start with fulfillment first when we're working with our clients. Because what we have found over 22 years is that when people start with the fulfillment piece first, they're able to get really a lot closer to what their ideal career or concept of it would be than they would have otherwise. They do a lot more brainstorming and they're a lot more creative thinking about what would be right for them. And they get a lot closer to something that could be a fit versus if they just said, okay, well, I want this amount of money and I'm good at this. So, okay, I'll take that job. It's worth doing the research and the homework to see, what else is out there and push for what you really want. The other reason why fulfillment is so important is because it actually interplays with or interacts with and impacts all of the other pieces. So for example, if you are not leveraging your strengths on a regular basis and those strengths that you actually want to be leveraging, you're not going to be fulfilled. And you might have some tasks that you enjoy performing, but if they're not attached to some of your values, you're probably not going to stay at that job in the long run. I'll use me as just a quick example. I had a job a long time ago, and it's actually when I lived in Chicago. I started my coaching business in Chicago. And I have a knack for marketing and communications and writing articles and that kind of thing. And I really enjoy those tasks. But guess what? I had a marketing and communications job, and I hated it because I don't want to be doing those tasks all day, every day. They don't give me, they're fun, but not as deeply meaningful or rewarding for me. And so you also have to pay attention to the fulfillment because those are the things that basically will help tell you what are the tasks that I could perform all day, every day and not really get sick of it. And too many people, because they don't think of that, they go off on a tangent. And again, they might find a job that, plays to their strengths, but because it doesn't have that deep meaning, they don't end up staying there in the long run as long as they could. So clarifying your career values is a really good thing to do. Let's talk about key number 2. So shifting from our first key is to identify and clarify your internal and external priorities. And while we talk about basing your goals and your values, because I'm sure some people will have this question, I'll give you some quick clues to starting to identify what your values are as well. So key number 2 here is to establish realistic goals, like things that you can achieve, like for me, I can't say next year I want to go be a pro basketball player or something silly like that, right? But we also want your goals to be meaningful and attached to your values for different reasons. If you look at this slide here, um, you'll be more motivated to achieve that goal because you're moving towards something that's actually really meaningful to you. And the goal will be more valuable to you, like holistically. So the goal will also help you kind of touch on all of the pieces of the model. Now, to think about and start to identify what your values are, some of the things you can do is to write about what success means to you. So like tonight before you go to bed or during dinner or before dinner or whatever it is, just take out a pad of paper for a second and just journal about, okay, what does success mean to me these days, given COVID and everything else, because maybe you've reevaluated things. And there can be clues in what does success mean to you. Those priorities that come out can be clues to some of your possible values. The way that we have our clients start to think about and identify what their kind of deep-seated values are versus pulling from like a list of career values on Google, which sometimes can get you into trouble because you might choose values you feel like you should versus ones that are really true to you. We have our clients identify their values by thinking about a peak experience in their life. It could be a moment in time, it could be a period of time for them. And we like them to actually think about a personal peak experience because that will get closer to who they are as a person and what's truly meaningful to them. And when they write about that and write down what was cool about it for them, a little bit less about the details and more about why was this appealing to me? So for example, it could be a trip to Italy, let's say. One person with their trip to Italy peak experience might say, I loved the planning, deciding where we were going to go, how long we were going to spend at each location, et cetera, doing the research about the budgeting and pricing. That person's more like a project manager, right? Versus another person might be saying, I'm not going to have a plan at all. I'm just going to show up. And I'm really about the food and the art and the culture, right? That's a different type of set of values for that person. So a peak experience in your personal life can help you start to identify what some of your values are for you as a person. And then the second step there would be that you can start to say, okay, what of these personal values are also career values for me? And we would encourage you to identify your action steps or have your strategic career plan action steps be aligned with those values in some way. So, for example, if you say, in my strategic career plan, I want to make this amount of money, if you can attach that goal to say the reason why I want this amount of money is because I want to be able to, go on these trips or whatever. But it could also be that I want to do this, this, and this with my child more often. Send them to a different school, whatever it is, attach it to something that's deeply meaningful to you. You'll be more motivated to achieve it. So let's do our second poll here, Samantha, if we could. And we did want to just ask briefly here, who on the call today actually has a strategic career plan? And it's okay to say no and be honest. Honestly, the majority of our clients, when they come to us, they don't. Hopefully, at least some people do. And for those of you, as we're filling this out, if you do have a plan, one of the things that we would encourage you to also incorporate into it is attaching each of your action steps or your goals to those values. It really does make a huge difference. Our clients love this exercise. Okay, so we've got 10% say yes. So kudos to you that you've got to start. That's awesome. And for obvious reasons why you're here, 90% do not. So thanks for sharing that, everybody. It's helpful for me to kind of gauge where people are as it relates to things too. And I realize that and let me actually go to this next slide here so you guys can kind of be noodling on this. I realize that it may feel like, well, I just need to go to my goals of, compensation and everything else. We really want you to start with your values. Now, after you've gotten clear on your values and kind of that internal, those internal elements of what you want your career plan to be, one of the tools that we use with our clients to help them establish their goals, but we would call these more external goals, if you will, is from this leadership wheel. This is from Development Dimensions International. And it is a leadership wheel with the top 10 leadership strengths that they assert are the most important in today's economy. So this is a leadership wheel. I realize it's a little bit fuzzy here. That's what happens when you blow up the image sometimes. But some of the things that we would encourage you to incorporate into your plan is any leadership strengths that you feel you may need to be working on. And the way that you can use this wheel is you can gauge yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these areas that is relevant to your current job or current career path. In some cases, some may not be relevant. And if that's the case, it's okay to skip it. So for example, leading across generations, if your organization is kind of homogenous according to age, you can skip that part. Okay, fine. And the same with intercultural environments. If you don't have a lot of international elements to your current career path, that's fine. But it's a great idea to rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 here to see how well you're doing in each of these areas. And we really like to push people to actually have their boss or a coworker rank them on this as well, so that you can get not just that self-assessment, but that external kind of perspective too. And these are things that you may want to say to yourself, okay, these are some action steps or goals that I want to include in my plan, because these are really, this kind of gives you a really good framework, if you will, for the leadership strengths that you need to be paying attention to and therefore may need to be incorporating. Sometimes people also forget to include like their own internal leadership goals. They tend to focus more on, okay, these are the skills I need to develop, these are the strengths, this is the money I want to make, and maybe that's it, right? But leadership strengths, even if your organization doesn't focus on those as much with you, they're still important to you as a professional in order to move up, order to move into a different organization or a different department. So as you're thinking about your plan, we highly recommend that you include kind of these personal goals for yourself as a leader. And just by the way, too, and then we'll move to the next couple of slides here. When we're saying leadership strengths, we don't feel that it's just about whether you manage a team or not. It's about being a leader within your organization or within the existing team that you have with your coworkers. And the more you demonstrate these leadership strengths and skills, obviously, the more you're going to get noticed. So we want people to do this and be really mindful of it. All right, so before we start to get to our third key, just wanted to mention if you have any trouble with, okay, what are some of the leadership action steps I should take, or need a little bit more help with your values or anything else we're talking about today, we always offer to people who attend these calls and our prospective clients too, quick career strategy session. It's free. We'll give you some additional advice, and it's also an opportunity to learn about coaching too. You can just email us at the email admin@halliecrawford.com, because we know sometimes this can feel a little bit overwhelming. So for our third key, let's start to think about like creating your plan and how do we start? What are the nuts and bolts a little bit here? So we want you to start with that internal meaningful part, as we said. You can also literally use our career model to go through all of those pieces or components and say, do I need to have a goal on my career plan in each of these areas? So for example, with your strengths, are there strengths that you want to be leveraging further? Or are there strengths that you want to add to your repertoire, whether your employer has told you to do so or not? Are there things that you want to do to adjust your role as it relates to your personality type? Do you need to talk with your team a little bit more to make some adjustments about how you meet, how often, or whatever it is? So one really easy way to start creating your plan is to literally print out the ideal career model and say, okay, these are some of the components I need to be considering. Then use the leadership wheel to add some things in there and attach all of those to your values, like we said. Some of the examples of things that you could incorporate into your plan are listed on this slide. So we'll go through these just really quickly with each one. A lot of people obviously in their plan will have some training and experience they want to gain for the next year. The good thing about training and experience is there's a lot more ways to go about this these days, because online education is just so much more prevalent and also more well respected, so to speak. Because we were online for so long. LinkedIn Learning is a really good tool that we like a lot. So I will put that actually in the chat box. We also like Coursera.org, and oops, let me make sure I spell that right. And if anyone has any other types of certifications they've obtained or any other classes that they've really liked, please feel free to share those with everybody in the chat box. We also have heard really good things about the General Assembly. They have professional development classes. I think they're usually in person. They may have changed that in large cities. But with training and experience, there's lots of different places that you can look for this. The other thing to be thinking about related to training specifically is to go to your industry specific association and see if they offer any classes or certifications that you could obtain. It's not always about having to get a whole nother degree, but there might be some certificates that you can obtain as well. And just by the way, too, as it relates to gaining additional experience, if there's a certain kind of experience that you would like to have, but you can't get it at your current organization or in your current role for whatever reason, do you want to do a little bit of freelancing or part-time work on the side to get that experience? We've actually had clients do online volunteering. Now, of course, you can't plant trees remotely, so there's only certain types of volunteering that you can do virtually, but there are a lot more opportunities and ways to do that than there ever was before in the past. And let me just put one place that you can find out more about online volunteering is Idealist, the website idealist.org. You can also Google online volunteering. It's another way to get some experience. One of the other things that you want to think about with your strategic career plan on the bottom left here is, what are the critical roles that you want to have along the way? So on the next slide, we're going to show you how we want you to kind of do your plan, like starting 5 years out. Where do you want to be in 5 or even 10 years? And work backwards from that. And it's a really good idea when you're doing that to think about, okay, what are the job titles I want to have and the roles I want to have that will get me to where I want to go? And if you're unsure what some of these are, you can do a little bit more research and maybe look at, for example, what's the job title I want to have later, and look at people's LinkedIn profiles to see what their path was to get there and what their job titles were. And if you look at, a few different LinkedIn profiles, that could give you a sense of, okay, what are the steps you need to take along the way? One of the things we want you to think about in the middle here at the top is, okay, as I'm creating my plan, am I realizing that I don't want to stay in my current job or within my current organization? I'm okay with being in my industry, but it's time to make a move. So you may need to think about that and incorporate that there too. And when we say here as well, do I want to be in the C-suite or not? More and more people are saying, nope, I don't want to do that. I don't want to manage other people or whatever it is. It's just to let you know that whatever works best for you is what we want you to think about and pursue. And don't go with any shoulds or you feel like you have to do something. Really think about what's most important to you first and then work around that. It's a really good idea to incorporate into your plan in the middle here at the bottom, what kind of support and accountability are you going to get with implementing your plan along the way? So find a partner in crime, your spouse, your partner, best friend, family member, whatever, who will help you not just create your plan maybe and even like make adjustments to it over time, but who's going to help you hold accountable. This could be a mentor, for example, too. Usually, as I said earlier, most people say when they come to us, oh, I've been thinking about this for years and I haven't done anything about it. And that's part of why they want the coaching. And then finally, on the right side here, we want you as part of your career plan to put a line item in there of leveraging, expanding, or at least maintaining your network. Your network is so critically helpful. It is so good to have a stable of people that you can ask for their opinion, their advice on, get job search help if you ever need that, etc. And usually networking is the thing that falls by the wayside and people don't pay quite as much attention to as they should. We also want you to make sure you incorporate into your plan how you're going to manage around the obstacles or blocks to success that you typically encounter. These could be anything like procrastination, not staying organized. I personally am really good at writing things down and then not looking at them again. So for me, it's about regular accountability and making sure I've got a monthly task to evaluate and look at, my business as well as my own strategic career plan. And I've set aside that time to make sure I do it. So lots of different things you want to incorporate into it. Now, when we're looking at guidelines, and we talked about this more just a second ago, for creating your strategic career plan, you want to be proactive about it. Look at, start with 5 years or 10 years and work backwards and do milestones along the way. Okay. We encourage people to not just develop their plan, but develop like a vision of it. And don't be afraid to kind of dream big with it. Don't hide behind like, okay, well, this is the only thing that's going to be a realistic and, I can't do this, or any other fears or confidence stuff you might have going on. Really think big and create a dream, like vision of where you want to be going, because I guarantee you, if you do that, you will get closer to it. Even if it's not exactly that, you'll get closer to it than you would have otherwise. So think big. Don't hide out in the corner and not be willing to take a risk, because you'll get a lot closer to it if you do that right out of the box. We talked about including obstacles to success already. We talked about checking and updating your strategic career plan. We would recommend checking on it and making small adjustments, maybe monthly, but make sure that you're really digging into it quarterly at a bare minimum, so that you're really making those adjustments and course corrections, because you know what? Things can change. It's good to have a plan and put something out there and say to yourself, okay, at least I've got the plan. I can always make adjustments. Some people are afraid to put their stake in the ground with things, but we'd rather you say, I'm going to put my stake in the ground, but I can make adjustments along the way. And we have a template that we use with our clients, that we give them, when we start out with this in a one-time session. And it's basically, just so you all know, it incorporates the elements that we've talked about today, as well as the elements of the career model. And for us, it's in an Excel spreadsheet. We like that better, because then you can have your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. You may have a different kind of, version of software that you would prefer to use, whatever it is, but make it simple and easy, and something that is, I want to say, like visually appealing, but also really easy to navigate too. So one really long running Word document may not be the ideal thing, just FYI. Okay, before we get to action steps and Q&A here in just a few moments, I wanted to just say a few kind of closing, create your plan kind of thoughts here. The idea that we're talking about today, if nothing else, is that you want to be the CEO of your career. Our goal with our clients is for them to be and feel like they're at choice as much as they possibly can be, because no one wants to feel like, oh, well, I just fell into this, or, oh, this just happens to me. And where did the time go? And, I don't know what happened. So as much as you can, this is about today. It's about taking charge of your career and at least putting some plans out there. Again, if not all of them happen, we understand. And we also know that you can't control everything that, that happens in your career, obviously. And it's not like you can just go to your boss tomorrow and say, I want these 10 things. Okay, that's fine. But if you at least put it out there, you'll get a lot closer to it otherwise. By defining your goals really clearly, like we talked about. We also want you to be thinking about the importance of strategic career planning as part of marketing yourself and building you as your own best asset, your career as your own best asset, like we talked about at the beginning. The tools that we talked about today and exercises will help you build your brand over time and help people understand what your value is, not just to your current employer, but prospective employers later on. It will help you develop a portfolio of, skill sets and career enhancing experience and everything else. And we want you to make sure too, as you go, as being the CEO of your career, like we talked about just a second ago, we want you to make sure you're taking calculated risks to get out of your comfort zone, to try something new, to get towards that dream or the vision that you'd like to have. But remember that we talk about calculated risks at the same time, ones that are going to be worth it, but also, move you forward towards your career. We want you to be thinking about creating value on a regular basis with your employer. So actively, always, you want to seek opportunities across your organization to seek out new opportunities, new ways to get involved. Is there some new experience I could get by working with this person or on this project? And this is, again, where networking comes in. And creating your plan like this will help you also build your transferable skills if it is time to make a move, whether it's now or later on. And it will help you optimize your career life fit too. You want to think about the evolution of your career, not just like we said in the next, 6 months to a year, but the evolution of it over time. And that's why we want you to start with the 5 or 10 years out. It's really interesting when you do that because it can totally change your perspective about what you're doing today to move towards it. And too many people we find don't think far enough out. And if they had, they would get a lot further along to that goal if they had in the first place. Okay, so Samantha, we'll go ahead and start to move towards taking action and Q&A here. And what we'd like everyone to do, please, is get out your pen and paper or on your computer or your phone or whatever, write down one action step that you will take in the next week. And honestly, what I would do is just pick one that resonated the most with you. Because I know we gave a lot of different kind of action steps. So it may depend a little bit on where you are in your planning process. Or it may be like, oh, I feel this need to really define my values, or I really need to get clear on what my strengths are because I kind of think I know, but I'm not totally sure. So we've got some action items on the right-hand side. For some of you, like at the bottom, you might say, okay, I can get to the model really quickly, and then I can start on my plan because I feel like I've got, a sense of a lot of these things already, and that's great too. So go ahead and write those down. And by the way, too, if you'd like to share them in the chat box, please feel free to do so because we'd be happy to see them and share with everybody as well. And we also can take some questions during this time. Just as a quick reminder, it's at the bottom here. If anyone thinks of any questions that they didn't ask today, even if it's weeks out, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer, no problem at all. And if you need to, and I'm just going to the chat here too. Oh yeah, okay, workbook. Okay, good. I'm just going to pull up the chat to make sure we have everything. If you have any other questions or we don't get to your question today, just email me and I'll answer it kind of offline. Okay, so we did have a couple of questions come through that I wanted to answer if we could start out with that first. So one person had asked, any advice or tips from moving from salaried work to freelance work? I love that question, especially because that's what I did. Actually, again, when I lived in Chicago, I was working at a university there. It wasn't the University of Chicago. That would have been awesome, of course. The way I approach this and what I would recommend is the financial plan part of it is going to be really important. And if you can either save up the right amount of money before you go full-time freelance or kind of do a blend of both, what I would suggest is keep your salary job and even just start the freelancing on the side a little bit right away to see how you feel about it and how it goes. So you can kind of see what kind of adjustments you may need to make to it over time. We've had clients say that they want to go freelance and they were really glad, for example, that they tried it out for like 3 or 4 months first because they learned a lot about what was going to work and what wasn't going to work for them, and were able to make adjustments before they jumped into it. So I honestly would try to do both a little bit at one time to get your sea legs just a little bit, if that makes sense. and make sure that part of that obviously is going to be the financial plan. So, when there's the gap and you're starting out freelancing, maybe full time, how are you going to handle the bills for the first 2 or 3 months, for example? Another question was advice on moving from the arts to a different field entirely. The first thing I would do there is to try to identify what your transferable skills are. And this honestly would go for anyone moving into a different industry, but from the arts especially, sometimes it may feel like, okay, how are my, skills transferable? Well, did you manage specific projects? What kind of creative elements were in your current job that could be relevant for other positions? So I would look at your resume and identify what some of those transferable skills are and start to kind of write those out, even in comparison to a possible job that you would be interested in, for example. And it's really helpful to have a friend, family member, or a coach like us go through that as well, because they may have a really good objective opinion and pull out things that you hadn't thought of that could be transferable over. So that was a great question too. Thanks for that one. And another person had asked a great question about the data supporting that it's an employee's job market. So the data that we tend to use is from bls.gov. It's the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. One of their recent ones, and obviously there's a ton of stats, but it was in January, 467,000 new jobs were created that were, at least for them, non-farm jobs. That's just how they said it. Anecdotally, though, what we are hearing is that the Great Resignation is actually accurate. I know some people are like, oh, they don't want to put labels on things, and I get that. But we have had a ton of our clients say they want to make a move, they're ready to make a move, and those people who are currently working are saying that people are just leaving their organizations, companies, whatever it is. So if nothing else, even if it's not necessarily about the statistics being that all of these new jobs are being created, it's definitely about there's a lot of movement in the economy, and people are just going to somewhere else completely, different, or even the same, but you get the gist. So thank you for asking that. Is it ever, we've got another question. Let me just check this one out here. Is it ever too late age-wise to develop a strategic career plan? This is a great question. Thank you for asking this. I don't think so. What I would do, depending on your age and where you're at, is think about retirement. When do I want to retire? What is that age? And even beyond that, what do I want to be doing in retirement? Because more and more people aren't just going and sitting on the beach, although that sounds fantastic. They are wanting to have a sense of purpose and something to do in their retirement. So absolutely. And you could call it a strategic career plan into retirement or beyond retirement, whatever is best for you. So absolutely not. We want people to stay challenged, fulfilled, have a sense of purpose well beyond their traditional career. So we'd encourage you to do it at any phase of life. It just may look a little bit different from someone in their 20s, which is reasonable. So great question. Thank you for that.
Hallie, here's one in the chat from Anthony. A lot of employers, and I really want to know the answer to this question too. A lot of employers are complaining that they can't find talent. Where are the great resigners going? I feel like that's the conversation that we're all having around our water coolers right now.
I know too. And I like these comments that are going in here too. So I think this is a great question. And I'll tell you, here would be my answer, anecdotally kind of too, is that we've had a lot of people like either taking a little bit of a break and like sabbatical. Now, of course, we can't all do that. That wouldn't be something that I could do, but they're like taking a little bit of a break and just taking their time and going through savings a little bit, taking their time to figure out what's next. So just one example, we had a client start with us through coaching last fall, probably in September. And she was so burned out with her job. She was like, I'm just taking a break. She had worked really hard in the entertainment industry, working on a big TV show, honestly. And she's taken all this time like off. She's been thinking about this a little bit. So I think a chunk of people are doing that. Some people are actually like staying put in their in like a they're getting like a retail job or something that isn't as high level is where they were before, and they're just kind of again like reevaluating and assessing things there. And so I think that part of what's going on, in addition to what we just said, is people are being picky about it. They're not just taking the next job, and even if 5 employers are contacting them, they're not necessarily going to respond to all of them, because they're like, no, I don't like that job, I'm not going to do it. Whereas in the past, it's like, I really need to have a job, so yes, I want that. They're just being pickier. That would be my guess. And if anyone has any other thoughts, I'm open to sharing them and thinking about it too. But yeah, that's where I think they're going, to the beach.
Oh, that would be great, especially
Yeah.
sitting here in cold Chicago. There is one more question that came through, Hallie, earlier. So it's someone who says specifically, what if I'm going from the arts into the sciences? How do I adapt my strategic plan? Let's maybe make that a larger question for the group. What if I'm changing fields? How does your strategic plan change?
Yes. So your strategic plan, thanks for saying that. That's good. It changes in the sense of, it's still good to look at your long-term big picture. Like, okay, ideally, 5 years, I want to be here or whatever. But right now, you need to be thinking a little bit more tangibly, if you will, about, okay, what are the strengths I need to gain, the experience I need to gain, et cetera, in order to make myself more marketable to this new direction. So I would honestly be thinking about, can I stay put where I am for X amount of time for the next, let's say 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is? Because, for example, I need to get this experience over here, and I can get it through taking a class. I can get it by, some of the work that I do, or kind of volunteering my time at my current industry or current organization in this way. So focus more about getting yourself ready for that next move in a tangible, practical way, if you will. And then after that, you're starting to think about your materials, like updating your resume, your LinkedIn, those things. So if you're making a change, that's what you want to think about first. Great question.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have from today. Hallie, any closing remarks before I close this out here?
Baby steps. We want you to just kind of take this step by step. Don't think, I know some people get overwhelmed by this, me included. So just think of it as, okay, let me work on it for 20 minutes tonight, and maybe, 30 minutes a day over the next, week, or every other day, whatever it is. Don't feel like you have to do this all at once and it's got to be done and perfect and you don't touch it again. It's an organic, living, breathing document. So just take it day by day.
It's a great reminder. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise on this call today. I learned a lot. I've written down my action steps. I'm excited to explore that leadership wheel. It was wonderful to see some alums on the line today. Thank you so much. Give yourself a little round of applause. You spent an hour during your lunch break working on yourself and on your career, and that's exactly what you need to be doing. So step 1, already done. You're going to see a survey when you close out this webinar. Please share your thoughts about this event, your kudos that I can pass along to Hallie, and any ideas of how we can be most useful for you for future events from the University of Chicago. And then I shared a link in the chat for the coffee and conversation session that's happening tomorrow morning. Hallie mentioned networking as one of the big pieces of your plan. Let's put that into practice tomorrow. We're going to be having a UChicago alumni networking session in the morning. BYOC, bring your own coffee, and I will look forward to seeing as many of you there as can make it. Hallie, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye, guys. Thanks.